I was working at Marvel Productions with my partner, Dick Robbins. We were head story editors of the studio at that time. We had just been finishing up the first year of the Transformers, and Margaret Lesh, who was the executive producer there, asked us to come in on Defenders of the Earth and be story editors of that series for the 65 episodes they were doing. The show was actually created before we got in on the show. It was being developed by Larry Parr, who was a friend of mine, another writer who was probably going to story edit the show. He went on to something else, and we got brought in when the show was up and developed and running to go. So we just wrote the pilot episode, Escape from Mongo, and we just went on from there and story edited 65 episodes. I'd been a story editor, I guess, with Dick Robbins originally at Hanna-Barbera before we went to Marvel, and I worked on Scooby and Scrappy-Doo and some other shows, The Little Rascals with Dick Robbins, and then when we moved to Marvel, we did the Transformers. So when we went to Defenders of the Earth, we were pretty much doing the same types of jobs we were doing before, which is basically coming up with the storylines, assigning them to writers, and developing them into scripts so that we would have at least one script every week. For this show, we actually had to do scripts on a faster rate. I think we had to do like 2 a week, so we did have to have some assistants. Tony Pastor Jr. and Barbara Kane, his assistant, also helped story editing the scripts. We were all sort of frantically trying to get material out into production as quickly as possible. We would accept premises from writers and read their ideas for stories, select which ones we wanted to use, and then the writers would work with us on coming up with outlines for the stories, and finally finishing into scripts which included all descriptions of all the dialogue and the activity and the backgrounds. Anything that you would actually see on the screen had to be described and then put down into script form. And at that point, then it would go to the storyboard artists to represent into illustrations. I enjoyed the show because we were working with classic characters, Phantom, and Flash Gordon, and Mandrake the Magician, and it's always a treat to work with classic characters that someone else has created, and you want to, of course, do them justice and make sure that they're true to their characters, and yet you want to bring them into modern times and really make it fun for the audience to watch them and share in their adventures again. The show was developed originally with a different staff. Larry Parr was originally in charge of developing the show, and under his watch, actually, some of the characters were different genders. As I recall, Jeddah, the daughter of the Phantom, was originally going to be a son of the Phantom, and I believe that Rick, the son of Flash Gordon, was going to be a daughter. They already had models drawn of these characters, and they had to go back and change them and rewrite them. A lot of developmental issues were already taken care of by the time I came in on the show with Dick. I never read any of the comic strips for Flash Gordon, so I can't really tell you what elements were actually in the show. Mostly what I know Flash Gordon is from the motion picture serials of the 30s or 40s. And then, of course, they did a feature-length picture, Flash Gordon, I believe around the same time, around 1980. So I don't really know what elements we had to remain true to. We could be a little freer to develop what we wanted to with him. Flash Gordon is kind of the square-jawed hero of the show, and we enjoyed giving him lopsided phrases, and such as easy as cake, or, well, he would say, yeah, easy as cake, or piece of pie, rather than piece of cake and easy as pie. Probably my favorite character was Mandrake the Magician. I just really enjoyed the fact that he had a different sensibility than the other characters. He was more of a gentleman, the way that he dressed and expressed himself, and since he could do some sort of hypnotic magic things, he had better powers, I think, than the others, and we had more interesting uses for him. The Phantom. The Phantom was an interesting character as well, too. He was created by Lee Falk, and we had contact with him as well, but he didn't really have any direct contribution to the series, other than just initially giving us his blessing for that. I enjoyed the fact that the Phantom had a generational quality to him that he was passing on to Jeddah, and we got a lot of stories out of the fact that Jeddah was going to be the next Phantom, and that there had been Phantoms before this one, and there'll be Phantoms afterward. We got to use that aspect of his character in the plots of several of the episodes, which made it very interesting for the fans. I did get to name my dog Kisa, which is named after the pet that Jetta owns, the jaguar that she has. So that was the one lasting thing I took from the show, is that I got to name my dog Kisa. Ming the Merciless. He was really fun to write for. He did say a lot of stereotypical things like, you fools, or invaders, alert, or whatever he would say. There were just dialogue that were sometimes was fun to write for him, and sometimes it was just sort of over the top. He was not as active, obviously, as his minions. His minions could actually do more. He had to actually pose more. But occasionally he did get into the action as well, and that was fun to do. But we tried to make him as imperious as we possibly could, and so he, being a very traditional classic villain, we had a lot of fun working with him. My friend David Wise wrote 14 or 15 of the episodes, and he really was probably the top writer of the series. Most of his episodes, I think, were my favorites. I really enjoyed reading his scripts, and for the most part I didn't have to change too much when we actually went to production. So he had the right quality of drama and comedy and action adventure that the series really deserved, and I think he really did a good job. Another one that he did was, and I can't remember the name of it, was the one in which the Phantom was thought to have been killed accidentally, and Jetta was going to have to take over his duties as the Phantom. And that was a very powerful story. We were very concerned at the time about whether we could actually show the assumed death of a character. At that time, Margaret Lesh had hired 2 child psychologists to review the scripts, to let us know whether the themes involved in these scripts would be too mature or too troublesome. We did have a lot of opportunity for the use of mature themes in these shows. We showed probably more violence than other shows. There were illustrations of guns being fired, and they weren't necessarily all ray guns, which at that time, ray guns were considered safer than obviously guns with bullets. However, the child psychologists gave this their approval, and we could show this episode as long as we showed that the Phantom was not actually dead and that he was going to come back to life. So, you know, it may seem like a small thing, but it was a very, very big issue at the time. And I enjoyed it. It was a good episode as it came out. I think there was a lot of powerful emotion in it, as I recall. I worked with my partner, Dick Robbins. Dick was actually a television writer from a previous generation that found himself in the animation field. Dick was invaluable to me because when we wrote a script together, he would usually write the first draft and I would get to do just the rewrite. And he would actually face the blank page, which I think is probably the biggest fear of any writer. He liked to throw in anything that he thought might be fun for young people, but he didn't always have the greatest idea of what young people might enjoy, so I sometimes had to take things out. But I really enjoyed working with him. I worked with him for at least 7 or 8 years. We did the Transformers together, as well as the Little Rascals, Monchichis. Yes, Monchichis, we remember that show. And I enjoyed working with him a lot. I enjoyed working with Tony Pastor Jr. He worked with Margaret Lesh, and he also did some of the story editing of the scripts, and he was a lot of fun to work with. He always had a lot of energy, had his own projects going at all times, and I don't think we could have done the show without him. I think really he had a lot of input on the show and how it looked at the end, and I think he should be credited for that. When I look at the show now, there's a lot of good animation, a lot of effects that were very technical for the time. Nowadays we have computer-generated graphics and animation that really is outstanding and looks much better than what we could do in 1986. But for 1986, it had a lot of quality to it. There was a lot of good animation, there was a lot of good color. I believe that the stories themselves were both exciting adventures, and yet they had some family elements to them, some human elements that the characters could actually interact with each other, and as father or son, or children and parents, the generations, and so I think it was a good mix of that. I was very proud to work on this show because I thought it was fun for kids, and I thought it wasn't something that was condescending to them either. It just had a nice mix of all the elements. I'm amazed there are fans. I mean, I'm not sure how long this show has been on the air, so I have no idea who's been watching it, or if they're just fans from a long time ago and they're my age or slightly younger than I am. I think that's great that you can remember a show that long. I haven't known any fans personally, so I can't really speak to them, but if you found something in this show to like, well, more power to you.
Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Out of the sky, his rockets ignite. Jets into battle, flying faster than light. Flash Gordon. Lord of the jungle, the hero who stalks. The beasts call him brother, the goes to war. Phantom. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Master of magic spells and illusion. Enemies crumble in fear and confusion. Mandrake. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. His strength is a legend. His skills conquer all. Armed with his power, we never will fall. Lothar. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. With our new young heroes proving their worth. 4 become 8. Defending the Earth. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders of the Earth.
I wrote a lot of Defenders of the Earth. I wrote 15 episodes, which is like almost a quarter of the number of episodes that they did. I was very happy to get on the series for a lot of reasons. Number one, the story editor was Bryce Malek. Bryce is my best friend. We had met on Transformers and we became thick as thieves. He's been best man at both my weddings, the one and then the one that lasted. And I love working with Bryce because he would just pretty much leave me alone. Or if I needed pulling back, he would pull me back. So that was the first reason. The other reason was it was these great characters. Mandrake, the Phantom, Flash Gordon, these are classic, these are the kind of characters you would sell your mother into white slavery to be able to write for. And on top of that, I had known Lee Falk pretty much all my life. He was a family friend. Lee Falk created the Phantom and Mandrake. He was, in fact, I have a Mandrake daily strip from the 60s. My family had known him. I had known him all my life. I had more or less grown up knowing the guy. So I was very excited about writing his characters, and I wanted to make sure I did some episodes that were sort of homage episodes to him. Basically, the supervision on Defenders of the Earth was Bryce, my story editor, the producers above him, and King Features. And King Features, as long as you treated the characters with respect, they were fine. Bryce always let me have my way. Most of the time, the producers were too busy to mess with the scripts, with one exception that I will talk about shortly. So we got to do some things on that show that we you've never seen on any other cartoon show. My favorite episodes are, there's one called The Sky Band, which is a Phantom show and which actually flashes back to the classic 30s newspaper strip Phantom, since the Phantom is generational, passed down from father to child. And basically what I did was I just took an actual Lee Falk Phantom story called The Sky Band, which was about women Nazi sky pirates, airplane pirates, and made it a backstory to this story about modern day futuristic female space pirates. And the things we got away with in that show, we have loaded real guns being pointed at the camera, which you are not supposed to ever be able to show a real gun with real bullets in it. We have people, the Phantom getting shot point blank in the chest. We have the Phantom and a Nazi woman sucking face in a dungeon. We have the same woman plummeting to her death, and not only do we show it once, we show it 3 times, although, and I have to say that it was only once in the original script. Somebody decided to flash it back. Death, sex, dungeons, Nazis, all sorts of things you're not supposed to be able to do. And the only thing that got cut was the reference to the Nazis. In the original script, I tried to keep it down because I knew it was going to kind of be trouble. And I already felt this script has enough bad. I really thought they were going to kill the script, frankly. But there's a reference where the Phantom says, the Phantom in the 30s says to the leader of the 30s Sky Band, what about your bosses in Germany? And I think that line got cut. And that's as close. We knew we couldn't show a swastika. We couldn't show any of that stuff, so which was fine. And the kids wouldn't understand anyway, so that was no great loss. Another show we did that I really liked was called Flesh and Blood. And that was a Flash Gordon story. And that was about, this is going to contain spoilers. So if you haven't watched this episode yet, turn this off now and go watch it and then come back. There's this group of robot haters, the old racism. This is an old science fiction ploy that the hatred of machines is a stand-in for racism. So, but we stood this on its head a little bit. A paramilitary group, since the show is set in the future, who think that robots are making humanity soft and stealing our souls and all, and are generally bad, who go around committing acts of terrorism, destroying robots. Well, Flash Gordon happens to fall in love with a woman who turns out to be part of this terrorist group. And he's totally dismayed, and they have to go through their whole love story, but then when she says, "You've got to join us," and he realizes what she really is, he dumps her. And he starts thinking about it, and he makes a realization, and what he finds out is, what he realizes is, that this anti-robot group are robots. They are robots that have been programmed so perfectly to think they're human that they've started an anti-robot movement. And there is a scene where where this is revealed, where Flash Gordon walks up to one of the robot guys and says, "I usually find that whatever a person hates most, whatever a person takes the most offense with, is usually what that person is under the surface." And he rips off the guy's chest, and there's robotics underneath. This is the textbook definition of the psychological term of projection, which is basically I attribute my own faults to the people around me, which I do, by the way. And this is pretty deep stuff for a kid's show. And plus it had more making out, because he's making out with a girl who turns out not only to be, a member of the group he's sworn to destroy, but she's actually a robot on top of that. And at one point, Flash Gordon's looking very depressed, and he goes, "Boy, when I make a mistake, I do it in a big way." And again, this character, the female character, dies at the end, even though she's only a robot. There was just outrageous stuff in these series. The other show that I really liked was called The Ghost Walks Again. I loved the script. The end product, unfortunately, was not so good. The basic premise was the Phantom is believed to be dead, and of course we tell the audience 2 seconds later that no, he's really okay, but all of our characters think he's dead. And the Phantom is generational. It's passed down from father to son to father to son, and now from father to daughter. And the story is really about Jeddah, the Phantom's daughter, having to suddenly take on the mantle of the Phantom and live up to all this responsibility, and she's a teenager and she doesn't feel ready for it yet. And it was a very sensitive story. In fact, Bryce Malek told me that this is pretty much before computers. They had a typing pool in Marvel Productions. And the typing pool, as typing pools were in those days, was largely women. And the women had a bet going that this script had been written by a woman because it was so sensitive. And the dialogue was so sensitive. But one woman said, it's a David Wise script, guaranteed, because they never saw the author's name. It's a David Wise script, guarantee you. And all those women lost the pool because it was. But that's how, this script had some real depth and sensitivity to it. Well, one of the executive producers, and I think it was Tony Pastor, but I'm not sure. Bryce could probably say for sure. I turned that script in on a Thursday. Bryce was done with it on a Friday, just doing his little polish on it. And it was turned over to Tony Pastor, who had to approve all the final scripts. Normally, Tony's a very busy guy, but he had nothing to do that weekend, apparently. So basically, he spent the weekend taking the script apart and destroying it. And the final product, it's still pretty good. I mean, I just, writers are very sensitive about these things. It just wasn't what I wrote. The final product is not bad, but the script, the original script, was 10 times deeper. It was the first series to be entirely animated in Korea. Korean animation was definitely second to Japanese animation in terms of quality at this time. They were just getting their industry up on the feet. Now the Korean industry is excellent. The Japanese use the Korean industry all the time. But the animation is going to look kind of primitive. But the craft of the artists and designers and writers and story people behind it, I think really shows through. And really look at the stories, because there's some amazing stories in there. And also look at the end credit, because there were some pretty heavyweight artists involved with the design of the show, such as Valentino, who went on to found Image Comics, Alex Nino, who's a great famous designer. The show has a lot to offer. You just have to kind of look through or adjust to the fact that it's a 20-year-old show. It doesn't have the production values of a modern-day show. I'm proudest of, first of all, the fact that I think we really did honor to these great, great heroes, these great characters. They're part of our mythology. Second, I actually did some scripts that had more sophistication and depth and a whole lot of other words that I normally would never use in describing my stuff than your average kids show script. This series, if you look past the animation, which I don't really think is that great, there's problems with characters going off model and whatnot, but if you look through the production values and just look at the raw storytelling in it, you'll see that there's some, I hope, that there's some really good work being done, not just by me, but by other people as well.
Defenders of the earth. Defenders. Out of the sky, his rockets ignite. Jets into battle, flying faster than light. Flash Gordon, Lord of the jungle, the hero who stalks. The beasts call him brother, the goes to war. Phantom. Defenders of the earth. Defenders. Master of magic spells and illusion. Enemies crumble in fear and confusion. Mandrake, defenders of the earth. Defenders. His strength is a legend. His skills conquer all. Armed with his power, we never will fall. No. Defenders of the earth. Defenders. With our new young heroes proving their worth. 4 become 8, defending the earth. Defenders of the earth. Defenders. Defenders of the earth. Defenders of the earth.
While I was at Marvel, I was working on G.I. Joe Transformers, and one of the directors or producers, I think it was Rudy Zamora, said he was going to be doing Defenders. And I thought, well, what is Defenders? And he told me, well, it's Flash Gordon and the Phantom. And I said, wait a minute, you got the Phantom in the show? He goes, yeah. I said, you got to sign me up. You got to put me on the show. He says, well, we got Bob Klein. I said, you got Bob Klein? I mean, I had worked with Bob Klein before. So I go, you got to get me on the show. And he says, well, okay, we'll do our best, because at the time I was pretty busy on another show. But the other producer said, sure, take him. And I got a chance to board behind Klein and some other great board artists on the show as well. So that was a dream come true to do the Phantom, Flash Gordon, Mandrake. This was a great series. It had a long run, so that was a lot of fun. Too many Icemen were in the show. You constantly had to draw these Icemen over and over again, being blown up, put back together again, reforming. I mean, I had shows where I had maybe 10, 15 Icemen. and that was always a pain to draw that many characters. But I would love to do the jungle stuff with the Phantom. That was just so much fun, and I really enjoyed the space battles. At the time, Star Wars had already come out. We were all trying to do outer space stuff, and that was a lot of fun as well. In Defenders of the Earth, my favorite character always has been, always will be the Phantom. I've always been a big Phantom fan since grammar school. You know, this ghost who never dies and the ghost who always walks has always been one of my favorite characters. So when I heard they were doing Defenders, I fought hard to get on the show. I mean, I've threatened people's lives to get on the show because I wanted to do the Phantom. And I had a chance to do the Phantom quite a bit. On Defenders of the Earth, I got a chance to work with one of my storyboard heroes, which was Bob Klein, Don Manuel, and got a chance to work with them and tried to do the best show that we could. Got a chance to work with comic book illustrator Rick Holberg, who also I'd worked with at other studios. So it was real fun, a great experience to be on that particular show. Not just because I got a chance to work with these artists, but also I got a chance to work on the Phantom and with some great directors. So it was a really good experience. When I heard about the DVD release, I was extremely surprised. It was great. I was waiting for this show to come back. It hasn't been in syndication in, what, 15 years or so? So I'm really looking forward to it. I remember some great memories, some great animation, some great stories. So I'm really looking forward to the release.
Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Out of the sky, his rockets ignite. Jets into battle, flying faster than light. Flash Gordon. Lord of the jungle, the hero who stalks. The beasts call him brother, the goes to war. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. Master of magic spells and illusion. Enemies crumble in fear and confusion. Mandrake. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. His strength is a legend. His skills conquer all. Armed with his power, we never will fall. Lothar. Defenders of the Earth. Defenders. With our new young heroes proving their worth. 4 become 8, defending the Earth. Defenders of the